Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Diary of a Sales Engineer. We are episode 23. I am your host, Samir Sahai Kosser, with
Ryan Kruger, and today we are excited to bring back our first ever guest on for a second time with the release of his newest book, and we are excited to talk about it today. We have the man, the myth, the godfather of sales engineering, as coined on our last episode, Peter Cohan. So I'll pass it over to you, Peter, to talk about the new book and what we'll be diving into today.
Well, delighted to be here. Thanks very much for having me. Talk about the new book. Where to begin? Let me think about this for a second. So let's talk for a moment about storytelling. And what is your sense today? There's a lot of excitement about storytelling. What are you hearing? What are you learning?
Ooh, that's a good one. I would say for me, I've been actually primarily focused more on storytelling in my realm of sales, just because I'm finding better results by telling better stories, just like flat out. I think people are resonating more to the stories that we tell now more than ever. I'm not sure if that's because AI is maybe like so abundant now that maybe a lot of things almost sound too robotic, that maybe like people are looking for more of the natural stories to kind of latch onto. But I think like for me, when it comes to storytelling, I've been primarily focused on the types of stories that hook people, engage them, and then also that are relevant to them. I think there's too many times, at least for me, I'll try to weave in stories that aren't relevant to the actual person on the other side. And if it's not relevant, then like they're just disengaged right away and they'll immediately go and check their email, their phone, whatever it is.
So you just nailed one of the five, or actually several of the five attributes for successful stories that Chip and Dan Heath identified way back in that seminal book, Made to Stick. Remember that with the duct tape across the cover? Relevant. It's got to be relevant. Let's run an experiment. I'm going to give you the punchline. You tell me the name of the story. The punchline is slow and steady wins the race. What's the name of the story?
The tortoise and the hare.
The tortoise and the hare. Ding, 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 ding.
1-0, Ryan. Hey, 1-0, Samir.
There you go. Okay, now here's a little bit harder question. Samir will get this one. Who captured that and when? If you guys, if this is a podcast, so you guys cannot see their eyes, but their eyes are going left, right, left, up, down. So who captured that and when?
And when?
I'll give you the answer. It's one of Aesop's fables. Okay, Aesop's many fables. Now here's the when did Aesop live when he captured this?
I'm gonna guess 1700.
1700. Samir, your turn.
I feel like Aesop is much older, like that's the 1200s, or like even in the 700s, 400s, 200s.
So Aesop,
BC?
Zero?
It was a sunny day in ancient Greece. Aesop lived approximately 600 BC. 600 BC. So and that story was collected by him. He didn't draft it. It was in the verbal lexicon, if you will, for probably hundreds of years. Now, what if you were to articulate the slow and steady wins the race? Ryan just had a child, a baby girl. In a couple of years, she's going to say, Dad, how come I can't just do this right away? And you're going to tell her the moral of the story, which is what? What's the essence of slow and steady wins the race?
The moral of the story is take your time, do it right, and you'll have the output that you're looking for. Sometimes if we rush, we won't have it be done the way that it needs to be done.
Okay, now imagine that she is now 13 and just heard you say that. What will be her response to you?
Dad, it takes too long. I don't want to do all that.
Yeah, and it'll be a big yawn, and she'll say, okay, Gen Z, or whatever. So what's going on here is really, really intriguing, and it's one of the essences, I think, of storytelling, and that is that storytelling enables you to take a boring motif, a boring idea, And by wrapping it inside a story with certain critical storytelling elements, like the five that Chip and Dan Heath identify, that story can live for, in this case, 2,600 years. And there's a second thing that's really important about it. Well, the two of you, between the two of you, retell that story. Just start, it's very simple. Just retell the story. What happens?
There was a race between a tortoise and a hare. Well, the hare was talking shit first, and then they decided to race.
Yep.
What's the next part, Ryan?
The next part is the hare jumps out to a early lead and then gets sidetracked along the way, and the tortoise ends up stealing the race.
There you go.
Well, the hare got a little cocky too, and it's like, I'm going to take a nap because I don't have to worry about the tortoise.
So this, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, this is the essence of stories, because not only do they carry that message success, and it's a boring message, but they carry it successfully for now 2.5 millennia. And you can retell a story with incredible accuracy and precision. So you just retold a story that's been around. You heard it once or twice as children. Maybe that was it. But it got captured in our brains. We are literally wired for stories. So what is the moral of this? There's several morals. The first is, if you want to engage your audience, and you want to engage them in such a way that they retain a key piece of information, you tell them that key piece of information. That's the fact. And they go, okay. You can improve it by wrapping that, or you can improve that by offering it in the form of an analogy or a metaphor. So, our search tool is literally giving you the ability to find, the AI needle in a haystack of billions of text elements, okay? That's an elegant way to help explain what something is and or potentially how it works. But if you want somebody to remember it and to be able to retell it to others, what do?
You wrap that in a story.
Yeah, you wrap it in ding, ding, ding. You wrap it in a story. So let me just pause there. Comments or thoughts about that?
I mean, I think this is super relevant to like anybody in sales today. I don't think it's just relevant to sales engineering. I think anybody in sales needs to be listening to this art of the storytelling aspect. You're a BDR, SDR, your story has to be concise in either 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 90 seconds, however long you're going to have that initial conversation with somebody on the phone. You're an AE, that story gets a little bit longer depending on where that lead's coming from, inbound, outbound. But you got to figure out how to tell a story very quickly. Sales engineering, we get a little bit more time to actually like tell our stories, but you still have to figure out like what the audience is going to engage with. Do they want the long story? They want the short form story, like the tortoise and the hare, is about slow and steady wins the race. Or do they want the whole thing? Do they want the tortoise going down the path that the hare beats him out to, that the hare takes a nap? Do they want the whole thing? Maybe they do. I think that's just like the nature of the beast, is that certain people will respond to certain stories better. But you got to figure out what story to weave and when.
So this is perfect, and you took away the essence of storytelling in the form of a story. Let's change gears, and neither of you have read the book yet. Is that correct?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so Ryan, I'm going to suggest that the book actually should be a perfect interlude between diapers, feeding, crying, and that's just you. I don't know what you have to do with your daughter, but because each story. Let me see if I can. This is a podcast, and the audience won't be able to see it, but.
We do video on YouTube, so for anyone watching on YouTube, you will be able to see this.
Okay. So, for example, then, here is the first story in the book, and you're seeing page 1 of it and page half. So most of these stories literally can be consumed within a minute or 2 minutes. They were designed specifically to be done that way. I'll tell you how they came about in a moment. But let's just do one. Let's start with that story. It's called, what is it called again? A logo slide lesson? Hold on, let me pull it up here. Here it is. So it's called A Painful Logo Slide Lesson. And I'm just going to tell this as I used to tell it, if you will. Here we go. As I used to tell it, because I would use it in a workshop to underscore the meme, the idea of don't do corporate overview presentations. Okay, now we've all heard that, right? Say
Yep.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and yet, how many organizations still inflict corporate overview presentations on their audiences, on their prospects?
Pretty much all of them.
Many, many, many. So I was in. I think this happened one of the first times somebody asked, "Well, why not? We were always told to do this." And I said, "Well, let me tell you a true story. This took place a few years ago. I was leading a business unit in a Silicon Valley startup. We were a year and a half old, and we had some earth-changing technology. Well, we went out to our prospects. These were generally face-to-face meetings, but it doesn't matter. And our standard process was to present it was about a 7 or 8 slide deck. Talked about our founding history, our founding fathers, our financing, our god awful mission statement. It talked about this, that, and the other thing. And it included, yes, a logo slide. And we were very proud of the logos on our logo slide, as most organizations are. And I was at an organization, a prospect on the US East Coast. And we just started this meeting. We're about 5 minutes into it, and I present the logo slide. And as I'm, pointing and proudly talking about them, I see two guys in the front of the room, right at the front of the table, and they look at one another. They lean over and they whisper something back and forth, and they shake their heads negatively as they're doing that. And I'm really, Ryan is going, ooh, and I'm really curious. So I said, would you guys share what you're just talking about? And they said, yeah. You see those guys in the lower left-hand corner of your slide, the logo? And I said, yeah. He said, we think they're idiots, and we would never buy something that they would. Cured me. So when people talk about social proof and they make assumptions about how great their logo slides are and so forth, don't. It cured me. This was an object lesson on this. So that's an example story. That's the kind of stuff that's in the book. Before we go on, comments or thoughts about that little story?
I think it makes sense. We only think about the upside of having all the logos and assume that every logo has a positive standing and is well regarded within their own industry. So it's almost like if you're going to do a logo slide, you should do a little background check on how the
Yeah.
vibes of those logos are across the industry. If they're the 1,000-pound gorilla, hell yeah, you maybe use them. But if they are someone that no one knows or hasn't earned the respect in its
Well,
place, maybe.
this was a major major pharma chemical company that we all know or all knew. It had a reputation, though, within the industry that we were unaware of being a laggard in terms of adopting new research technologies. We did not know that. There was a small business unit in that company that was looking and was using our tools. But the rest of the organization was slow and stodgy. Very, very slow. They were laggards. They were late majority moving towards laggards. They eventually got acquired as a result of that and partly broken up. But the real message is what you just said, Samir. Don't assume that the organizations that you see as validating your products, technology, services are going to resonate equally. 1,000-pound gorilla will resonate potentially with the next two folks in line below them, but not with a startup because they're a totally different animal, literally.
Can I
Yeah.
I want to offer two things that I'm thinking of on there. One, I look at this logo slide thing in a whole new light now. Somebody I was working with said hey, this is a NASCAR slide, right? And I was like, oh yeah, this is
God.
it makes it's so clear to me exactly what it is, right? So it's hey, these are the stickers we put on the NASCAR, right? Everyone looks at it. So I do like that, but I do think if you are going to do any sort of logo slide, you should be really tying it into here's a couple of companies that we know you resonate with from previous conversations. Here's some actual use cases and benefits that you get. If you want to go the logo slide route, don't just throw it up there and say do you think it's cool and wait around.
Mm-hmm.
I hate that. That's just that will drive me nuts. But there is something that you said that I want to double click into a little bit, which is you stopped your presentation and ask these two individuals, would you mind sharing? Where did you get the gusto, the sort of confidence in a presentation to ask that question? Because I find that 99.999% of salespeople would just sit there, see that that's happening, and just plow through the presentation as is.
That's a very interesting observation. And the answer is, I don't know. I think in this case it's a personality attribute. I'm extraordinarily curious. I will if you ask me what I do many evenings between 10 p.m. and 11 p.m. because I don't have a baby girl to deal with, it's reading about something. So I'm reading a book, a biography right now of Mark Twain, and about every 3 pages, I run into somebody or something that I think, oh, I don't know about this person or this thing, and I go to Wikipedia and I look it up and I start reading, and then I'm gone for the next hour. I'm going from link to link to link to link, just absorbing things, going, oh, that's really interesting. Oh, I had no idea about that, etc. Curiosity is what pushes that, and that may be something that is an attribute that should be promoted in the customer-facing community. Yeah, there's a story in this book. There's a story in this book about a woman who was doing a demo of scientific software, and she had used an early automated demo tool that basically it just captured each screen one after the other, and all she needed to do was hit any key on the keyboard to present the demo. Well, she started off with a reasonable introduction, and then she hit her first key on the keyboard, and she described what had happened and what the audience was seeing. Then she did it again. Then she did it again. Then she did it again. And by about the 4th time she did it, you could tell she had done this literally dozens of times, and she was so bored that it came out that way. I mean, we were all almost aghast watching this exhibition. Needless to say, there was no sale. But what the moral was there is really you got to be the opposite. You got to be curious. You got to be engaged, and that's something perhaps that needs to be taught. So the answer, Ryan, is I don't know. It's just my personality.
Mm-hmm. I will say, in Ted Lasso, the Walt Whitman quote is be curious, not judgmental. I think it's a good approach to sales, because I think there's a side of, a salesperson that can look at two people kind of shaking them off right away, and immediately the judgment starts to come in. Okay, you're a startup company. I've sold to big pharma. I've sold to the top player in this space. Where do you guys, get off shaking your head to our logo side, right? So I think there's the judgmental side that can come in, but instead you decided to be on the curious side to say, hey, hold on, I'm curious.
What's
right?
going
And then
on
you
here?
got back good information, right?
This is hugely important. We're not talking about doing discovery in theory in this session, but this is hugely important when you're doing discovery. And in fact, it's one of the most successful attributes is that any time when you're doing discovery, you hear something that's different, unusual, intriguing, you pursue it out of earnest curiosity. And that is actually a way of turning discovery from a inquisition or interrogation into an engaging bidirectional conversation. People respond to curiosity, to earnest curiosity. Let's talk. Can we change gears and talk about what caused me to write this book?
Yeah, let's look. Today's a conversation, so we can absolutely change gears into that.
So, in the workshops that I no longer teach personally because my voice goes out after about 2 hours, I would do exactly what we talked about earlier. I would introduce an idea. I would discuss it with the participants. I would often offer an analogy or metaphor to try to help explain it more intimately. And then I would offer often a story as a way of embedding it in their minds. Over this last couple of years, I keep hearing these stories reappear from people that were in the workshops and other people that those participants worked with. And I suddenly went, my brain went, what's going on here? And I realized, oh, they're retelling those stories, just the way we retell all stories that really resonate with us. And because stories can be retold with incredible accuracy, and because they contain that meme or that idea, these were spreading really well. And I thought, I'm not doing this directly anymore. This is an opportunity to give back to customer facing community. I'm going to capture what I think are the best stories. So there's 35 of them, 34 of which, to be fair, are the real stories that I would use in workshops and other types of training. One story, the last one, is designed to really try to pull everything together. And that's sort of a surprise gift for everyone. It's the idea behind it. But I wrote this because it kills me to see all these posts in LinkedIn and recordings that I watch and analyses that I see of people just repeating the same mistakes and the same errors over and over and over and over. So, instead of reinventing the wheel the hard way, the whole idea behind suspending disbelief is to enable people to get the benefit of a few years of experience in these disciplines. And so, in alignment with the idea that people really want bite-sized learning, in many cases, there are others that really like to dig in, but this is designed to be engaging, easy to consume, easy to digest. And I've had I've had several people say, Cohan, that's what you told us it was going to be. But what I ended up doing was sitting down and read the whole thing through from start to finish. So, best laid plans. So thoughts or comments on that?
I wanted to actually jump into something you said almost at the beginning, where you shared the framework of we have like a lesson, then an analogy, and then a story to like tie it all together. And I think one of the biggest, I guess, disagreement I might have with all of these storytelling posts and conversations places is it's almost trying to mimic like a traditional story where the ones you shared, we wait up until the end for that punchline, right? But when you are in a selling motion, your prospects don't have the time to wait up until the end for your punchline. So for you to like, I'm just curious your thoughts around that when you're actually doing this in a demo situation, in a situation where you are trying to get your prospects to remember through a story. Like, how are you setting it up? How are you using that similar framework in that degree? Because everyone understands that regular storytelling build up to peak, climax, resolution, a joke, the punchline, like the kicker, but that's not how it really goes when you're actually in the sales process.
So this is a really important, very important point. So the lead into a story itself is critical. So for example, if I say to you guys, would you like a true demo horror story?
Yeah.
What do
Yeah,
you what do
I'm
you say?
hooked. Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So that's an example. That's an example. You're you're baiting the hook and sending it out into the water. So lead-ins can be extraordinarily important. Get to continue that. So I used to use that phrase all the time. Would you guys like to hear another demo horror story or discovery horror story or whatever it is? And everybody's like, you can see people lean forward in their seats, as you say that. And then how you title the story of the rest of the lead-in can be equally compelling. So, for example, would you like to hear the true story about snatching defeat from the jaws of victory in a demo? And you're hooked now, right? You need to hear it. Well, I'm gonna. How do you keep an idiot in suspense? I'll tell you later. I'm gonna force you. I'm going to force you to read it in this book. It's called Snatching Defeat from the Jaws of Victory. And the moral of that is stop selling when the customer is ready to buy. Has to do with, don't flog that guy with extra features, be done when you're done, et cetera, et cetera. So all those memes, stop selling when the customer's ready to buy, don't use too many features, you don't have to fill the whole time in a meeting. They're all embodied in a 2.5-page story that's designed to engage, it's designed to have an element of surprise, it's designed to have some humor, and it's designed to give you a life lesson at the end that you don't have to invest 30 years to learn along the way.
You know,
Does
I
that
was
help?
actually, Yeah, I think this is like a good topic to riff on because I was actually in a demo recently, and I can tell you, like, I started off by, pursuing the sort of natural stories that I would tell about blank functionality. And as I'm going through the functionality, the prospect stops and goes, Ryan, this is more than we would ever use or utilize. This is perfect. I still had more stories to tell. I still hadn't even got through the whole story that I wanted to tell. But as soon as I heard that, I immediately just pumped the brakes and said, I'm done. I don't need to show more. I don't need to oversell. I actually just stopped what I was doing, unshared my screen, and said, all right, sounds great. I There is an aspect that I think in sales we love to do of just hey, well, I'm not done saying what I want to say. So I'm now going to force you to listen to what I have to get off my chest. But in this case, the prospect didn't actually need more. They'd already heard enough. Well, if they've already heard enough, then why do I need to continue to pursue by storytelling
You
more? And
don't.
that's where I think like you have to like have the ability to one, stop your story at any point in time, but also figure out how to tell your story faster and more effectively for other audiences. So go back to the point I made at the beginning, right? Some stories you want to draw out, and your prospect is going to want to hear about the tortoise and the hare taking a nap. They're going to want every last detail of the story in order to buy the software. But there's other people that are going to want to buy by just saying, oh, go too fast, you make mistakes, slow and steady wins the race. That's what they're looking for. So don't give them the whole story about the tortoise and the hare and the nap because they're going to get bored and they're going to become dejected. They're going to say, maybe this is more than we ever need. In the case of today, it was more, or in the case of when this happened, it was more than they ever needed. Why do I need to tell more? Why do I need to sell more?
Let
I
me.
don't. Breaks.
Would you like another demo horror story?
Sure.
Let's hear it.
This is the second story in the book. It's called the credit card story. I'm just going to literally read it here. So each story is introduced with like a 1-line or 2-line description. I then offer a quote and then I dive in, and that's it. So the intro here is, it's easy to be seduced by the features of your own products, right, Ryan? So the quote is, I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. Thomas A. Edison. Okay, the story goes, told to me by an early Great Demo Workshop graduate. This guy actually did a podcast called Tripping Over the Barrel, where he retold the story. He says, not long after your training, I was doing a demo for a small but important prospect in oil and gas. The CEO of the company was, obviously, the key prospect player, and he was in the room with a few members of his team. We were all seated around a small table. I ran everything from my laptop as there was no other display. Well, I'd done a reasonable job with discovery and knew the CEO needed certain reports that he couldn't either get with their current environment, Excel, or it took piles of manual effort from his team to produce. Even worse, he needed many of these reports on a daily basis. So I started the demo with a simple situation slide that I built for him, reviewed it, and confirmed the information was all correct. He commented that, well, things are even worse now as the business grows. I then showed him examples of the reports he wanted, and he leaned forward in his chair towards my laptop. Leaned is actually Leannnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnnn takes to generate these? He says, absolutely. A few mouse clicks later, he'd seen me produce several reports. He smiled, took out his wallet, and slid a credit card across the table to me. I thought, wow, I've got this sale. I could have stopped there. I should have stopped there, but I didn't, he says. Instead, I got all excited, forgot your training, and started to show more and more stuff our software could do. At first, he seemed to appreciate the additional features, but just a few minutes later, it seemed that with each new capability I showed, his smile faded further and further until he slowly reached back across the table and gently, deliberately, and painfully for me, he took his credit card back and returned it to his wallet.
Oh
No sale.
no!
So the moral, that's the stop selling when your prospect is ready to buy. So those are the type of stories that are in this book. What did you think? What did you think of that cute little story?
Heart was racing.
Yeah, I was like, no, you got it. Yes, we got it in the bag. And then I was like, oh, no, we don't got it in the
We
bag.
got that. So he oversold. He oversold. Ryan, it's exactly what you felt there as you were going through your situation. So yeah, so these are designed to enable all of us to take advantage of the experiences of some of us who have a little bit more gray in our hair. Are you guys familiar with the DIKW progression?
No.
It's data, information, knowledge, wisdom. So this is the progression that we go through. So the data. So here's an example. It's winter. It's cold. You and your wife are looking at crossing a body of water, a pond of some kind. The data is it's below freezing. Okay. The information is looks like there's ice on the pond. Okay. The knowledge is we might fall in if it's not thick enough. So the wisdom is, well, we should probably carry rescue equipment if appropriate and consider going around the pond. And then, of course, the additional wisdom is from my wife, who said, well, you go first. So the DIKW spectrum is what we all go through as we go from novices, new hires, onboarding. We learn the data. We learn how to do the demo. The information is then we begin to connect what people need with what we can show in the demo. The knowledge is, well, what works well and what doesn't work well. Then the wisdom are things like when to stop with the demo because the prospect is already convinced. So that's what this book is all about. It's trying to collapse the amount of time and energy that customer-facing folks would otherwise have to invest to get to that same level of knowledge and wisdom. And by the way, if you can find a better return on investment, the book is $24.48 in the U.S. $24.48. That's the price that was set. If you can find a better way, better ROI, because I've already had reports that the book saved was one of the pre-release copies of this went to somebody who reported back to me that he rescued $100,000 deal as a result of using one of the stories in the book. If you can find me a better ROI than that, tell me.
I
Peter,
will
is there
say,
a way that we could get, is there a way for our audience watching this podcast today, like if they order the book, is there any way that we can get them like a signed copy from you,
Yeah.
or is there a way that we can raffle one off to our audience watching today?
So we can do both. I'd be happy if you want to raffle a few off. I could send you a few copies signed, and more than happy to raffle them off. If somebody wants a signed copy, there's one of two ways to go. There's one of three ways to go about it. And just send me an email saying we want to buy a signed copy, and I'll sign it. I can put in whatever you want, ship it to you, and send you an invoice. You can take whatever form of payment we need. One thing I've been doing is if somebody is willing to publish a nice review on Amazon and has bought a book, so it actually has the verified purchase thing, I'm more than happy to send them a signed copy, physical copy, and then they can hand the physical copy they bought to a colleague so they can, if you will, extend the love that way. So that's at least, let's say that's two ways to go about it. How's that?
nice.
Okay, we love it. Yeah, our audience, I think, will be really receptive to that. Go ahead, Samir. I hate to cut you off.
Oh yeah, no, I mean once we drop the episode, we'll have a raffle off. We'll probably do 1 week for people to sign up, and then we'll announce it. So that's super exciting. I was gonna say that I did read all the Amazon reviews and they were all fantastic, and I haven't seen anything that had like 25 plus paragraph reviews, all 5 stars. Huge.
Well, and it's Ryan. This will sound really weird, but to a certain extent, so my two daughters are completely grown up and launched. Publishing a book, releasing a book, is a little bit like launching a child. because it's yeah, because it's here's the analogy. See how these work? Here's the analogy. It's on its own now, and I can sort of push it along, but it's up to it to make its own way in the world. So yeah, that's one way to help, at least.
Okay. Hey, well, we're wanting to help make sure that your books out there, after they're launched out there, make their way through as many people as possible. So keep up the 5-star reviews. We'll find a way to get the books in the hands of our audience. Yeah, I think that would just be awesome. Like, I think, for me, it's really cool to have you on, in your perspective of this all really being, one of the godfathers of the industry, as we said in our very first episode with you, but also to sit here and to watch what you've done with your career around this too, right? Around helping other SEs and creating materials that people can actually use, and I think that's the special thing about maybe this industry as a whole of sales engineering and pre-sales, is that there isn't enough information out there. So to have a book that has 35 tales in there, or real stories of how to do the job better, is actually something that can provide real ROI, right? You can't get to that level of knowledge and wisdom without actually going through and experiencing these things. But if you learn from somebody else, then you can apply that knowledge too. Like I said, today, or not today, when I had this demo, I had the option of continuing forward, but because I've done enough of these kinds of calls, I knew full breaks, just stop. There was nothing more that needed to be sold. There was nothing more that needed to be told. So I could just stop what I'm doing, felt comfortable stopping, sharing my screen, and felt comfortable ending a meeting early, knowing they had what they needed. That's really helpful to somebody going through it the first time, because I used to be the guy that would oversell. So
So
you've got to learn those things.
And there's a but wait, there's more. I will now oversell your story here, but there's a but wait, there's more on this, and that is, how do you feel? How do you feel personally when you get out of a meeting early?
Incredible. Like, I now
Yeah,
have time to go eat or grab a coffee or use the bathroom. The things that go by the wayside in the virtual world. I need
there you
5 minutes. I need 10 minutes.
So the moral is, when you've scheduled an hour or an hour and a half, let's say, for a demo, and you're done in 35 minutes, guess what you should be? You should be done. And you say to your prospect, as you look at your watch, you say, nobody has watches anymore, do they? Come to think of it, neither do I. Anyway, as you look at wherever time is shown, yeah, oh, you got to watch. You say, you say something to the effect of, oh, looks like we're 25 minutes early. And then you say to your audience, and that's 25 minutes you get back from home run, for example, or whatsoever. And your audience, your prospect, goes out of the room with a little upbeat step, and they're thinking, those guys are really good. They didn't squander our time, and now I've got the ability to go have a bite, go to the restroom, or get some real work done today. So yeah, that's a nice little lesson. There's nothing religious about an hour. It's an arbitrary unit of time. So if you're done, be done.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
I think like that's a good visual for everyone listening to think about the credit card on the table. If you feel the moment of somebody sliding the credit card towards you, it's a good indication. Just stop. You don't want them to retract the credit card. Your goal is to get that credit card across this sort of virtual line, or like if we're thinking in football terms, you want that credit card across the end zone. So maybe they're sliding the card on meeting one, and that's discovery, and they go from the 0-yard line and they go to the 20-yard line. The next call you have on a demo, they go from the 20-yard line to your 40-yard line. You got 40 yards left to go. You go through a security and technical validation. You've now made it to the red zone. You've now gone through an additional demo call to do some executive overview. You feel that it's right there. It's at the 1-yard line. What don't you want to do? You don't want to take a penalty. Don't go from the 1-yard line back to the 20-yard line. Just stop. The goal is to get the credit card across the line.
So that's, and a field goal is insufficient in the game of sales. So that's what Ryan just did is a perfect example of applying an analogy. That was beautiful, or a metaphor. I never know which is which. But that's a great example, and people remember that. Yeah, you don't want to have a penalty when you're right close to scoring a goal. You mentioned something really intriguing, and this might be a topic for a future session of Diary of a Sales Engineer. You mentioned the data or privacy survey or study that has to be done. How familiar are the two of you with the concepts of buyer enablement?
Yeah.
Ooh,
Ooh,
I,
there's some. Go ahead, Samir. Yeah.
well, I mean, I think it's just where with us having access to a lot more information, we come to the table pre-researched and actually want to be able to go and look up stuff on our own without having to talk to someone. So buyer enablement being, I think that's one part of it where you're actually giving them information before they have to come to and see a demo. I think the other part is, I want to say like the less marketing term is ensuring that the buyer knows how to actually buy within their company of, oh, I most times we have to do the security review. Do you know who the IT person is? Do you know XYZ? And you're guiding them and enabling them to actually do the logistical piece of buying. So I think there's two ways of using the word depending or the term depending on the context.
so that's you are peeling back the layers. So, if one were to try to endeavor a definition of buyer enablement, it's anticipating and proacting to make your buyer's experience as frictionless and smooth and speedy as possible. And it suggests a range of different dimensions. Samir touched on one, which is how experienced is your buyer? A second has to do with what's the level of complexity of the offering, because buying tools versus buying, I call tools basically like something like Excel, MS 365. Those are tools, as opposed to buying a CRM system which has 13 different user populations as a minimum, for example. Anyway, how experienced is your buyer? How experienced is your buyer as a champion? Um, and on and on. So this could be a very intriguing topic for another session. Just thought I would hand that out to you guys.
Yeah.
Hey, well,
Uh,
if you're willing to come back on, we're willing to have you. We're willing to have you back here anytime. I think it's always amazing the conversations that we have, and I do think like from the buyer enablement standpoint, there's so many different aspects that we can go down into from that, which, like you said, is probably best served for another day. But there's also the indecisiveness of a buyer, especially an unexperienced buyer, somebody that's doing it for the very first time. We want to go
But yeah,
back down the analogy route. I've been doing some home projects here. So that means I got to run over to Homes, Lowe's, whatever I got to do, right? Home Depot, Lowe's, and I got to buy tools. Buying a hammer, easy. It's like, nobody gets fired for buying a hammer. You're going to pick out a hammer, it's going to do the job. But when you need specialized tools, you have to do your research. You're doing your research and you're still like, I still don't know what I'm buying. So you walk into the store, you ask an associate, hey, I'm looking for said thing. Do you know about said thing? I need a little bit more insight and information. Then you walk away and you're like, man, well, there's one that's top of the line, maybe $150, $200. The other one, $70, $80. Is the $70, $80 one going to do what I need? What's the difference between the 150? I don't know. I'm not really sure what the specifications are that makes it different. So maybe I walk out of the store and say, I got to do some more research. There is a buyer indecisiveness that I think happens within SaaS too. So sometimes you got to coach your
God, yeah.
buyer on being indecisive to say, this is what you need. Here's why you need it. Here's why you're going to pay said price for this thing too. So there's a whole nother area I think that can be explored there too.
And there's even a story in this book called "My First Major Software Purchase Ended in Failure," which is absolutely true. And I won't do that story because it's a nice lesson for people to take away. So I'll let people consume it on their own. But yeah, absolutely. So buyer enable might be a fun topic to pick up, and I'd be honored to join you guys again anytime.
awesome. As always, I'm left with just more things to digest with your conversations. I remember last time Ryan and I talked after we had you, we were like, wow, mind like just expanded again. got me really thinking.
Well, that's my job, and stay curious, never stop learning.
Yes. Thank you so much, Peter. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. Everyone, please check out Peter's book. We will also be raffling or figuring out how to raffle out a book or working to get you guys signed copies in your hands. If you're interested, reach out to either Samir or I on LinkedIn, and we'll probably come up with some kind of form or something everyone can fill out for one of the signed copies. But if you are interested, feel free to message us on LinkedIn. That way we know and we're aware. That way we can put out the form to you and make sure that we get you entered in the raffle.
All right. Thanks, gentlemen.
All right, thank you,
Thanks so much.
Peter. So, what did you think of that?
Ooh, wow. I mean, it's amazing to have somebody like Peter come on the podcast again and just be supportive of, our journey in the realm of Diary of a Sales Engineer and getting our voices out there to everybody else that's either an aspiring SE, an SE that's looking to up level, an SDR, a pre-sales person that's looking to make the switch into sales engineering. I think it's really cool to me to have somebody like Peter be so supportive of us, and that's why we definitely want to be supportive of his book back. And I'm really excited to get my hands on it and read through some of these different tales and stories that are in there, because it is amazing to learn from other people in this industry that have experienced these kinds of things prior. You don't just know how to be great. You learn how to be great. That comes from doing, and it comes from learning, and it comes from interacting with other people. I find a lot of times just having conversations with other SEs, which I try to do my best at. It's a little bit harder right now when I just don't have the bandwidth always to do it. But sometimes just from conversations I've had with other people, I start to learn, oh, okay, this is how you do a proof of value. That's interesting to me. Why do you do it that way? Okay, why do you lead discovery this way? Or why do you go on site versus not go on site? Or just having natural conversations, you start to build up your knowledge around what works and what doesn't work. And I think a book like Peter's is really helpful to anybody out there looking to just kind of up level their skill set. And especially learning from an industry titan like him, I think is really amazing.
Yeah, I always find he is a very good storyteller, just in all senses of the word. But I thought it was really interesting about the hook, and I keep trying to apply it into sales conversations, because these stories are really good, dining table, dinner party, conversation style stories. But when we are actually in the sales motion, you got to be slightly different. So I think it for whatever reason, and you can see where my mind is. It's almost like when you're in a sales situation, you have to have a hook, and then you go into the story, and it's just like a LinkedIn post. And I think me and you talk too much about how do we write in such a way, and then it got me thinking. I was like, well, if you do the same thing before you jump into a story, you give them something to kind of chew on as you're going through, then they'll be engaged. And give you that extra time to almost do the build up. So you have to almost earn the right to build up, um, before you go and do that. And I thought that was very interesting. And even the breakdown of, it's almost like the hook, then the analogy, and then the story to bake it all in.
Yeah, and I think about the hook from a couple of different perspectives. I think if you're an SDR, BDR, you've got to nail that hook. You have got to come into a cold call with sort of your thoughts on what they're probably going to care about, and give them that immediate hook to say, I'm willing to stay on the phone for another 5 seconds and learn about what you're going to say. For us as SEs, I think the hook looks and sounds a little bit different. I think maybe it's something that I'll probably try to take a stab at a little bit differently, of how to approach a hook. Because the first thing that I go to, when it comes to this idea of a hook, and this is just where my brain's at right now, the perfect place I think where it could be introduced at really well is the customer success story. What if I were to tell you that customer X was able to automate this by 20%? Would you want to hear more? Yeah, I would love. Yeah, of course, I would love to hear about how they did it. I think maybe that's a good place where you could really introduce a hook in a way that feels really natural to the conversation. I also think you could do it for features and functions, but you don't. I would be a little bit cognizant of too many hooks. right? I would think like too many hooks in a demo would make it seem way too salesy and you might lose some trust. But I think there's probably some ways to be like very engaging on the story, including a hook for like the three key things that they want to hear. I'm not sure what that looks and sounds like yet, but I definitely think it's something I'll probably take a stab at trying, at least like introducing something new into my workflow.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same way because how I'm showing certain, I think if I were to just like break down my steps, it's like, okay, I'm talking about a feature, then I'm talking about the value, and then I go into like some kind of story. And it's almost like figuring out a way to get into, instead of just like that feature value story progression, like change it up. And I don't know what that's going to be exactly, but that's where my head's at. Like I have a specific part of my demo that I know, and I always tell a similar story about one of the customers becoming successful. But maybe flipping the script and just saying, how would it feel if you could save 3 million in revenue because you figured out there was a blocker.
Well, I think maybe like you could go back to like, old school framework of like just like tell, show, tell there. Just like the tell is like, what if I tell you can save $3 million? Okay, they're interested. That's the hook. The show is here's how they did it. Then the tell is like, hey, like here's the wrap up of like the quick story, right? Like here's how they did it. I mean, I don't know. I find it really interesting because I think like we're doing these hooks a lot more in a demo than I'm probably thinking of, just because
Yeah.
they sound a lot different than the way like Peter approached it. Because the way Peter approaches it, it's so engaging. It's like, of course I want to hear about the demo horse, or of course I want to hear about from, like success to failure, right? In one conversation, like I'm wondering, I might have to just go watch one of my calls actually and identify like where and how I'm saying these different hooks because I guarantee they're happening. They probably just sound a lot different, is going to be my guess.
Yeah. Yeah. It'd be very interesting to try and identify it and identify the pieces that you're going into your story.
And I think like the pieces are like what people care about, right? Like that's the thing. Like the hook is like, what do they care about? Why do they care about it? And like that's the hook. You hook them in on what matters to them because it's relevant. If you try to hook them on like, hey, here's how customer X did 3 million. They don't care and that's not relevant to them, then they probably just don't care. It's not hooked. They're not on the line. They just don't care. Like, all right, cool story, right? I think there's like, I don't know, man. I think there's some stuff there that like is worth exploring, and I'm kind of excited to dive into it a little bit further because I do think about it from like the LinkedIn posting side of things. Like, okay, it's obvious, right? Hook, write, produce, right? It's like the same thing, but within the demo, I guarantee it's happening because you're hooking people onto the value that you're going to sell. So it's interesting.
Yeah. It'll kind of be fun to pull this thread. I think we'll have a follow up to this to share what we learned about ourselves and understanding how we're applying this because I think it's very interesting and I'm very excited to get my hands on the book. Uh, Anything before we wrap here, Ryan?
I think nothing before we wrap here. I think the final thing I'm going to say is we're going to do a wrap on these books. Maybe what we can do is, I don't know, we could just do like traditional raffles. Hear me out. Or we could do like some kind of like raffle on LinkedIn where like we come up with some kind of challenge. We challenge the audience. We say, hey, the best comment or best story will get a signed copy, right? Like maybe like give us an analogy of like a story that's happened to you as an SC. The best one will send off a book. I don't know. It's just a thought. We'll play around with it. The competition, maybe we'll do both. I don't know. Just think it through. Think it through some stuff, man. We always try to make it fun here on Diary of a Sales Engineer. We're 23 episodes in. It's crazy.
Yeah, we're going to do something fun with it. And if you made it this far, thank you. We'll see you next time.
See you next time, everyone. Thank you.
Peace.